Hi everybody, I hope you're having a good day today. The purpose of this video that I'm creating is to talk about the first lesson plan that you will create for the course. So this is going to be a basic lesson plan. It's going to give you practice doing that, and it's going to work on some of the things that we've talked about already in class. So I suggest that you pause the video at this point and take out the lesson plan template that is part of this week and sort of go through that with me as I talk about each component. So the first part of this is when you start a lesson plan, you're going to want to always start off with the standard or standards that you want to teach during the lesson plan. So you need to go ahead and get the copy of the California State Fine Arts Standards out, look through those standards and figure out which one you would like to teach. You can choose any one, or you can choose a couple of them if you want. And that's going to go in that first box that says what standards will you be teaching. This is a process called backwards design. If you're not familiar with this, we always want to start with the standards or the objectives first and then build our lesson from that point. Sometimes people make the mistake of developing their lesson and then they try to squeeze in to what standard it fits with, and that's not the correct way. We want to actually start with the standard first. So in the first area, you're going to just simply list the standards. So the second component of the lesson plan template asks you to identify the multicultural component that you'll be implementing. And so what I mean by this is, what multicultural idea will you use in your lesson plan? So examples of that would be when you're talking about maybe disability or race or ethnicity or any culture at all. So you can pick something that you really are interested in. It could be something from your own cultural background, or it could be something that is you're not familiar with but you're interested in. So an example of this would be, maybe you want to really focus in on some famous Hispanic or Latino female artists. Maybe you want to look at Aboriginal art. Maybe you want to look at African American art from a certain time period, from the Jazz Renaissance, for instance. So those are all examples of cultural or multicultural components that you would want to identify for your particular project. All right, the third component of this lesson plan is providing a summary of the activity that you're going to do. This should be a really short summary, but what I'm looking for is where you're kind of almost brainstorming what you're going to do. So an example for me would be, maybe I want to highlight some female artists. And in my particular example, I would say I'm going to choose two female artists. I'm going to show the students the different artwork created by those artists, and then I'm going to ask my students to do an activity, a painting, where they incorporate aspects of each artist into the single artwork that they're creating. So that could be just a summary of what I'm planning on doing for the overall activities. Later on in the lesson plan, you'll give more detailed information about what you're going to do and the timing and things like that. Right, the fourth part of this lesson plan is going to ask you for vocabulary or key terms that you would want to incorporate into your lesson. So for instance, if I were going to teach a lesson on the Harlem Renaissance period and maybe focus on artists of that time, I might want to have some vocabulary that talks about the Harlem Renaissance. I might want to explain what that is. I might want to talk about the term African American. I might want to talk about discrimination or civil rights. Those terms would be good ones that you could use for that particular type of a lesson. The next part of the template that you need to fill out is how you're going to actually start your lesson. This is really important because you want to be able to engage your students and get them interested in the topic. So, some of the things you could do for that would be maybe show a quick slideshow of some art that is exemplifying what you're going to be talking about for the day. You might also do some sort of funny cartoon, or you might have students do a gallery walk in the classroom where you're hanging, pictures up and having the students go and try to figure out which ones belong to the particular culture or time period that you're talking about. You might give students a think, pair, and share type question that they would just talk about with their partner right next to them at their seat, and give them some time to talk that out. There's all different types of ways that you can introduce a lesson, but this is the area where you would try to add that in. Next part of the template is really the meat of the template. It is the part where you explain what activities and experiences you would actually use for your particular project. So in this case, you might say, well, I would like to do, I want to focus on sculpture from a certain culture. And maybe you would use something like tinfoil to allow students to be able to create their sculptures. So you're going to put at the very beginning, you're going to do your introduction. You're going to show pictures of sculptures from a particular culture. And then after that, you're going to ask students to maybe help you go through and do an analysis of one or two specific examples from that culture. And then from there, you're going to give instructions on how the students would use the tinfoil to maybe model that particular, cultural sculpture. And then from there, you would have some sort of closing item that would allow you to gauge student learning, and you would include that in the final activity for your lesson. So that's what you're going to include in this section. Last two sections of the template are somewhat related. The first template is asking you to identify any types of formative assessments that you would be using during your lesson. And so just to give you, in case you're not familiar, there are two main types of assessments. The first is formative assessment, and the second is summative assessment. Formative assessments are assessments where you're gauging student learning throughout the lesson. So maybe you want to have, you ask students to stop and at some point, and you ask them a few questions, and you just ask them to give a thumbs up if they agree, thumbs down if they disagree, or a sideways thumb if they don't understand. You could do that. You could also ask students to hold up a board where they're answering a question, and then you can see if they understand it. You could have students work in small groups or with a table partner to answer a question, and then circulate around and see if, listen to what the students have to say and kind of get a pulse on if they're understanding what you're talking about. The final section of the template is asking you for what sort of exit ticket you're going to have at the end, or a closure that you're going to have at the end of your lesson. I use the term exit ticket because that's a very common way to gauge student learning. People will often give they'll ask students here, they'll give them a sticky note, and they'll ask a question, and the students can write a comment or an answer on that sticky note. And then as they're exiting the classroom, they just place that sticky note up on a wall or a board or a whiteboard or something. You can also actually create exit tickets that kind of summarize what you've taught during the class, and then ask students to give you feedback on that or answer questions. And then you can look at those exit tickets later and see, did my students understand what I'm talking about? And if they did, great, you can move on with your lesson. Or if you notice a lot of students are missing some sort of part of your lesson, you can actually spend the next lesson going through that again. So that's what an exit ticket is. So those are the main parts of this particular lesson plan template. I hope that that clarifies each section. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me, send me an email. Okay, thanks. Bye.